Happy weekend, listeners. It's October 19th, Saturday, the mid of October, and it was a very, very busy week. In this episode, we cover 18 different topics of last week's drinks industry news, mostly covered by big brands acquiring or selling parts of their portfolio, and we will have a short look across the ocean to America. And guess what? We will talk about politics. I know it's not a usual part of this podcast, but if there might be an influence on technology, on the wine industry, and maybe some related industries, we should definitely talk about it. I was also busy this week. I'm currently organizing 8 different events until the end of this year, of which 50% are alcohol-free tastings. Isn't that crazy? So, what shall I say? It's coming. And you have no choice, guys. If you're interested in your personal alcohol-free wine tasting, no matter if you want to have it online or at home or wherever you want to, just send me an email at podcast@pinotpixel.com. And right now, let's dive into this fully packed episode. Welcome to the Pinot and Pixel podcast episode number 202. Fully packed this week's episode. So we start directly with the first topic. And as I said, this is usually not a podcast talking about politics unless there might be an influence on the drinks industry. And this is more kind of a related industry we'll talk about, Kamala Harris. So one of the 2 candidates for the president of the United States recently has announced on X, formerly Twitter, that she will have a pro-marijuana strategy focusing on a nationwide law on legalizing marijuana. Isn't that crazy? At the moment, every state regulates this on its own, and there is many states that are really against the legalization. Some are really pro, for example, California, and it has been a huge discussion over the last 20 years or so in the US. And right now, Kamala said on X, I will do my best to legalize marijuana on a national level. Where did this come from? She was traveling the country, talking to many people, and she was also talking to many black men. And usually they were threatened to own or to consume marijuana in a really, really bad way. And she says she wants to change that. On the one side, the criminal part of it, and on the other hand, she wants to offer future jobs in the upcoming industry, especially for people who have been part of the industry in whatsoever kind. And basically, this is her way of showing a huge support of the black population in the United States. And usually, this is not a part where Donald Trump is super strong. And the second thing, where Trump was way faster than her recently, was a statement that she will support the crypto industry. So right now, not only Trump is a pro-crypto guy, she also stated that she will build up a, as she called it, pro-digital assets agenda, focusing on the positive things of the crypto industry, of the digital assets industry, and to give people the feeling that all their investments are safe, especially when it comes to crypto. And this is a move that can really have a big impact on the elections in the United States in a couple of weeks. So right now we have a statement, pro-marijuana, pro-crypto, pro-digital assets, and it really feels like Kamala made some big moves this week that will also have an effect on the industry. And I mean, it's not wine, it's not drinks, but it's marijuana. It's closely related to drinks. And in addition, this is also kind of a podcast on technology. And this is why it is interesting that she is also pro-crypto right now. And it also was driving the market. So if you are invested in crypto, you could have seen some green spikes this week. Another thing from the United States that was published this week is quite a funny one. And my favorite one was an article or a thread on Reddit. Last week, Elon Musk held a presentation on Tesla, on robotics, on Optimus. And Optimus is his human-like robot. And on Reddit, there was this post saying Optimus talking and serving drinks. And I just press play that you can watch while listening to this podcast if you're interested in. The link is in the show notes, so you can watch the video whenever you want. So what we are seeing is a robot wearing a Texan hat serving drinks from a tap. And there are many speculations on if this could be a real thing or not, because every now and then there were presentations through Elon and Tesla where afterwards people found out that some people in the background were just, steering and manipulating the robots, or the cars were driving predefined roadways. And this could be the case, of course, as well. So maybe there is some guy sitting on a computer somewhere on the planet and just steering this robot. But in my personal opinion, this is definitely a future scenario, replacing waiters, or I would say easy tasks in households through robots, because this is definitely a technology that will see huge developments of even 2 years. And they will definitely be a solution not only for the private sector, but also for the business sector of many, many companies. And of course, there were some speculations on this as well. And my favorite comment was, imagine getting a drink at a bar and you find out the bartender has been outsourced to India. And of course, this could also be one of these solutions in the future, that you have 10 or 15 robots running an industry, a business, and then there's one guy sitting at a helpline in India or Pakistan or wherever, because labor is cheaper over there, and just overviewing those robots. And in case something is happening, he can just adjust the situation or just regulate the situation. In my opinion, one of the future scenarios, and we're not only talking about gastronomy, we are talking about easy to replace human tasks in general. Talking about the future of the industry, last week's conference on sustainability had a very, very famous speaker. It was none other than the famous Chances Robinson, Master of Wine. And my favorite quote of this conference was her opening up with, "We are all in the same sinking ship." And she was not only talking about the wine industry, she was especially talking about sustainability. And the title of this article is Complicated Rhetoric, Sustainability's Biggest Enemy. And yes, it is. Or let me rephrase that. Sustainability suffers from buzzword bingo. So many people have been using sustainable farming, sustainability over the last 20 years that it really became just buzzword bingo. Nobody knows what sustainable really means, what organic farming is, what biodynamic farming is, and there is a huge gap between the customers and the growers right now. Only few people understand what it really means to be working closer to nature, or making crafted wines, working organically, sustainably. And she says we have to include this in our storytelling. More and more people are moving in urban environments. Over 80%, what was the number she quoted? 84, almost 85% of the UK population is living in urban areas, and only few people even know how a farm looks like. So we have to include this sustainable farming, the idea of sustainable growing, of regenerative growing in our storytelling. And this is so important, and in my opinion, it's one of the most important factors for the future of the industry. And I recently had a chat with a friend, and we were talking about how one scenario of the wine industry could be. And in my opinion, we will have very, very cheap stuff, because some people are just interested in drinking alcohol, and this could be easy, cheap wine. And then there will be a gap where more and more wineries or companies will die, and then you will have at least a higher quality and also a premium sector. And this, you can also say it could be kind of a two-class society or so, but generally speaking, focusing on quality, focusing on crafted products, focusing on sustainable products where you have a story to tell, that you also are working with nature, respecting nature, is definitely one of the future scenarios and also a positive way of getting out of this sinking ship. There are so many people right now in the industry complaining about the decline in wine sales, about the decline in wine consumption, but only few people are really reacting, working with the market, identifying trends, identifying the interest of consumers and working with them. And I'm not just talking about marketing. I'm also talking about changing processes, changing your communication, maybe even your business structure. This is so important, guys. If you are listening, please, even if you think on your own that you might not have to change what is happening in your company, ask somebody from outside just to hold up the mirror and tell you, is everything okay what I'm doing, or am I acting, I don't know, stubborn or even stupid, or do you have anything you can recommend as a trend or as an optimization or whatever. This is so important, guys. Complaining is easy. Changing something to be more successful and going with the trend, with the industry, with the customers, this is way better than complaining. It's also harder, I get it. But if you want to be successful, if you want to stay successful, you definitely have to adjust to the market. That's it. Coming to effects on the industry that nature is bringing, or the climate change is responsible for. There were two announcements this week on this year's expected harvest in England and in Germany. And I mean, I have some friends in England. I will go to England in a couple of days, and I was already talking to some friends, and they said, we will have lower yields this year. We will have a very small harvest. Some even say usually we harvest 2 to 3 weeks, and this year was done in 2 to 3 days because we only have 20% of our usual crop. England is seeing heavy crop losses due to wet weather, due to rain in spring, due to mildew, due to losses of a very cool vintage. So in the end, England is expecting 20 to 70% loss, depending on which grower you are talking to. We will see final data, I would say, at the end of the year, I guess, but at least they are expecting 20 to 25%, I would say, in average, lower yields and smaller crop. And I mean, usually this feels like a problem, but looking at the bummer harvest of 2023 that broke almost every existing record in history, this might be a welcome change. Of course, not everybody wants to hear that, but I would say if you had too much last year, it could be a good thing to have fewer grapes, fewer wine available this year, especially when you want to focus on quality, especially as an industry, as a region, as a country in that case. And the same, maybe not in this huge amount, is happening to Germany this year. Germany saw spring rain with a poor flowering, with mildew, with a lot of fungal diseases. As usual, unfortunately, hail, storms, thunderstorms, heavy rain, frost, late frost. And in the end, Germany is expecting currently, or the harvest is forecasted to be 5% lower than usual, meaning sitting around 8.3 million hectoliters this year. And the same that accounts for England could also be said for Germany, that it might also be a good thing for the industry if you have lower yields, if you have a smaller crop, because there is still enough wine available. And so many companies, so many wineries struggle in selling their wines that a smaller crop in this year can really be a positive thing for the industry. When we talk about wine sales, about communication, about marketing in 2024 and 2025. Of course, everybody's talking about a huge problem and a severe loss and stuff. We're talking about 5%. This is a thing, but seeing the good side of it, it could really push the sales. It can support the sales processes, or the problem that the sellers are just too full, not only in Germany. We stay in Germany for one more second. ProWein. ProWein usually is happening in March every single year. It's the biggest B2B fair when it comes to wine and drinks. And usually they have a big problem with the hotel situation. Some people even say it is a crime that they are offering so expensive rooms that it really feels like a robbery having to pay for a hotel room. And this year they launched a hotel platform where you get discounts for hotels in the close area or even in the surrounding of the fair of Düsseldorf, so also in other cities just around Düsseldorf. So if you are interested in a cheaper hotel, and I have seen discounts up to 50%, this one is discounted 43%. I mean, it's still expensive if you want to be super close to the fair, but if you, I don't know, can manage to drive 15, 20 to 30 minutes with public transport, you can get your hotel for €100 per night. And this is definitely a very, very fair price for a hotel room during ProWein. So I'll put the link in the show notes. I looked for the English link so everybody is able to have access to the page. If you already know that you will be part of ProWein, this is definitely your page to find cheaper hotels. From one crime to another. And actually, this is the very first article ever on this podcast I found at Europol. Europol is the International Association of the Polices of Europe. And the article talks about wine counterfeiters that were busted in Italy for selling bottles of fake wine, where some bottles had a value of over €15,000. In total, there was a large amount of French PDO wine bottles found and seized. 6 people were arrested and over 14 locations were searched. In the end, it was a huge success because it was a big international wine fraud ring that was busted. And this short article brings it on point. What has happened, it was an operation investigated by 3 countries, France, Italy, and Switzerland, with their police involved. And in the end, they were successful. They have been investigating this for over 3 years. It's a huge amount of work. And I mean, counterfeiting is a big problem in the industry, especially in the wine industry, costing millions of dollars every single year. And every action like this is a success for the industry. And right now, we switch to the international markets. We start with Hong Kong. Hong Kong recently announced that they slashed the spirits tax. And this is a really historic move, as it was also titled by the drinks business in their article, because Hong Kong has always been the country with the highest spirits tax on the planet. 100%. 100%. Just the tax on spirits. And right now, they just got rid of it at all. Only bottles over 200 Hong Kong dollars have to add 10% of taxes, but the rest is just gone. And they just want to push the spirits market. And if you remember it, we talked about the tariffs that were set up by mainland China on brandy and other spirits categories. And this is not only a bold move when it comes to just changing history, it's also a bold move showing China we will definitely double down on spirits. And Hong Kong already has done this for another category in 2006. In 2006, they had taxes on wine and they changed it. And since 2006, over 12 years later, they had over $120 million more in the market, with a total of $153 million. Isn't that crazy? A 5x in 12 years, just because they got rid of the wine taxes. I mean, there is many other factors playing in. Of course, there was a change in macroeconomical factors and stuff, but it definitely had a positive impact on the wine industry. And right now they try to solve this. They try to reach that with the spirits industry, in the spirits industry. And the first big brands already said that this is a huge win. Diageo, Pernod Ricard, they are all focusing more on Hong Kong. And maybe Hong Kong can be the future center of spirits in Asia, because basically they are the biggest turnaround point for fine wine in Asia right now. And this could also be the case for spirits in the future. We will see that. We stay in Asia. And if you have ever been interested in how airlines choose the wines for their portfolio, there was an article by Singapore Airlines, and it really talks about how they choose their wines. And we're basically talking about fine wine, especially for business and first class, champagne. But I wasn't fascinated by the process, how they choose the wines. I was fascinated by the numbers. Just talking about champagne, Singapore Airlines pours 400,000 bottles of champagne each year. Isn't that crazy? I mean, I did some research on that, and they have several champagnes on board. They have a Bollinger, they have a Tétanger, they have Krug, they have Charles Heidsieck also for the Pieper Heidsieck for I guess it's economy class. And summing it up, they pour 400,000 bottles in 1 year. That is totally crazy. And on every main flight, it is available. People are offered to have a drink, have a glass of sparkling wine on the plane. And I mean, this is a typical picture. The sky-high toast, as they call it, where you get your flute of champagne and you can just enjoy your flight. And I mean, as a business or first class flyer, you are also allowed to have more glasses. And usually, in average, they pour 2 bottles of champagne per flight. This was shocking to me. Isn't that crazy? 400,000 bottles. And right now you might ask, what is so different in choosing wines for aeroplanes compared to just, a normal restaurant down to earth? There is a difference in pressure and in how you taste and feel 10,000 meters above the ground. And you have to respect that especially when you eat more acidic food or more spicy food, that there is definitely a change in the taste. So talking about spicy food, the spiciness is felt stronger. The taste is stronger above the clouds. So you have to have champagne with higher residual sugar, so where the dosage level is a bit higher and not super dry, because otherwise you will have even a stronger taste of the spiciness. Isn't that crazy? I would love to be part of such a selection process. And I mean, of course, I would love to try some champagne as well, but it is super interesting. And one of the guys who is involved in this process is Os Clarke. He's one of the guys in England when it comes to wine. He's also responsible for the very first book on English wine. This is one of the books that brought me to English wine as well. It's well written, and I don't know how old he actually is, but he's still in the business. It's super impressive. The other people involved, if you're interested in that, is Michael Hill-Smith, Australia's first master of wine, and Jeannie Choli, the first Persian of Asian heritage to achieve a Master of Wine certification. So it's people that know what they're doing, and they are the people who select the champagnes above the clouds. And maybe they haven't been involved in the selection process of United Airlines, because United Airlines is switching from bottles to cans, to canned wine. They chose, in my opinion, really premium looking brand. It's called Just Enough, replacing plastic wine bottles, especially in economy class, through cans. And this is a smart move. This is a bold move. This saves weight, and this is one of the biggest issues of airlines. It also accounts pro nature, pro sustainability, and in that case also pro CO2 footprint. They save a lot of waste, and they can include the aluminum of the cans into the recycling process of United Airlines. Also interesting, and maybe, I don't know the percentage of the international travelers of United Airlines, because talking about Central Europe, the classic old wine world, they still have issues with wine in cans, especially when we talk about the relation to higher quality. But I guess if you order a bottle of wine on the plane in economy class, you pay $10 for it and you get a plastic bottle, the feeling is even worse. They look premium. I don't know how they taste, but at least in my opinion, they even look better and of higher quality than any other plastic wine bottle I can imagine. So maybe this will also drive the sales. We will see. Definitely an interesting move. And talking about cans, the next article, the next news is not super exciting. It's a bit sad, actually. One of the biggest beer companies of Europe, BrewDog, recently had hygiene issues in their production facility. And this is really a bad thing when it comes to the product, of course, but also when it comes to reputation. It's a huge company, and millions of liters of beer were affected, especially with their Punk IPA, one of the most famous products. And the good thing is that most of the cans that were affected were identified within the company, within the production facility, and they were able to destroy it, but some of them were already or had been delivered to customers. 0.02%. Sounds like a small amount, but it was still a big amount. And it led to the highest complaint rate ever on a product at BrewDog. And the second good thing was there were no effects on health. It just tasted really bad and really sour. So people were complaining, what happened to this beer? I love that beer, but this is not good. Complaint rate rose, aggression rose, and also the international focus or the national focus, the focus on the company rose. And then there was an internal letter that was published in the beginning of October, because the issue already happened in August. And they're currently trying to solve the problem. They're trying to ensure that this won't happen again in the future. I mean, sometimes there are hygiene issues, especially in beer companies, because, I mean, fermentation involves bacteria and you really have to work professionally and just work at a very high standard level. And sometimes even big companies and successful companies struggle with that. And a little digression on that, when people are talking about quality, what they usually mean is a very, very high quality, even crafted product, I don't know, organically grown ingredients and stuff like that. For me, there's two different types of quality when it comes to wine quality. One is the product quality itself, when we talk about ingredients and the final product. But there is another thing that is really important. We talk about process quality. And process quality means you are able to produce millions of items of the exact same product at the exact same level of quality and of taste, no matter what the quality level might be, and issue this to the market. And maybe you don't like the taste of Moet et Chandon or Veuve Clicquot or of Mionetto or whatever, but issuing millions of bottles of the exact same product every single year, this is also a sign for quality, because you have to be really good at what you're doing. Those examples with BrewDog, I mean, they are a quality focused company, or we're of course working in the mass market. There's millions of products every single year released, but still process quality is important, and hygiene is one part of process quality. And when we talk about the effects on the company, especially in that case, the problem just occurred in August, and they missed their business goal in August by £950,000, so over $1 million. Isn't that crazy? Just because of this small, quote unquote, hygiene issue. That is crazy. And I mean, we're not only talking about money. This can have a huge impact on your brand if you don't solve the problem and if you are not good in communication. I have the feeling that the reputation wasn't affected in a really bad way. It was a problem, but at least they're quite transparent in communication. Hopefully it won't have bigger issues. They won't have bigger issues in the future, and they can solve the problem finally. Talking about beer, another announcement had been made by another beer company that is entering or sponsoring another club in the Premier League. And we all know that the Premier League, especially football in the UK, is very closely related to beer. And there were so many announcements over the last decade of brands either staying with their exact same club or entering the Premier League. We recently talked about Athletic, that became the first non-alcoholic sponsor of the Premier League. Guinness has been announced to be the first or the general official partner of the Premier League. And for example, some research on that, just if you're interested in that, Carlsberg has been the sponsor of Liverpool for the last 30 years. Isn't that crazy? That is what I call a partnership. Athletic at Arsenal. And right now, Tiger, an Asian brewery, has partnered up with Manchester United. And right now you might think, Tiger, an Asian brewery? What the heck? Yes, this is what I also thought. The thing is that Manchester United says we want to focus more on the global impact, on the global visibility of our club, of our brand. And one of the biggest impacts and a very, very large fan group is located in Asia. So this makes total sense to me, to have an Asian beer as a sponsor for my club if I want to focus more on the global market, especially on the Asian market. So another big announcement in the Premier League. And when we talk about sponsoring, Pernod Ricard, they might only be interested in sponsoring high quality premium brands because they are focusing more and more on premium. And we talked about so many sales and purchases, especially Pernod Ricard, Diageo, Constellation, and LVMH did over the last 2 years. And right now, there is the next announcement Pernod Ricard to sell multiple Nordic spirits brands to Royal Unibrew. And guess what? The main driver is that they want to focus more on its premium international spirits portfolio and champagne brands that drive the growth of the business. It's actually not a surprise, and Pernod Ricard recently announced that they saw a decline of 3% when it comes to revenue in the last quarter, and maybe they just want to focus more and more on premium, getting rid of their, I won't say entry-level brands, but the mid-range brands. This is one more sign that they are doing so. Coming to a smaller brand, but a brand I have accompanying over the last 3 years, Moderato. Moderato is a French startup. They started some years ago in Paris with only a few thousand bottles in alcohol-free products. And their main focus right now is having 2 different lines, one focused on retail, the entry-level line, the traditional one, and then they have a Cuvée Révolutionnaire line that is focused on higher quality gastronomy, food pairing. And they recently raised $3 million in funding for their next steps in growing the company and focusing on having 300,000 to 400,000 bottles 2024, and they are aiming to have a revenue of $10 million by 2026. You know that I'm quite committed to the alcohol-free space, and this is one of the brands I have been working with. I have been tasting for over 2 years now, and I've seen a huge progress with the brand, with the communication, and also with the quality of the product. And it's super cool to see that those brands are really making their moves into the market, getting the feet on the ground, entering new markets, Germany, Canada, the UK. They also growing in France. And these are brands that the industry, that the category really needs. And this is so cool to see. And it's one more investment in the alcohol-free space. The last 3 news of the week coming from the US are also focused on alcohol-free stuff. After the Oktoberfest in Germany was closed on October 6th, successfully closed. We talked about the numbers. A non-alcoholic beer garden is popping up in Brighton this week. And we are talking about the neighborhood Brighton of Boston, Massachusetts. We're not talking about England. This is interesting in 2 different ways. First of all, the name is super funny. The beer garden is called Notoberfest. I really love the name. It's just playing around with this. I mean, the non-alcoholic space is really a playground for word plays, for sometimes even stupid names. And in my opinion, sometimes when you are thinking of growing a brand in the alcohol-free space, Google the name beforehand. Because so often when I'm looking for products, I don't know, Zero Hero, Google that. You will never find your product if it's called Zero Hero. There's hundreds, thousands of pages, and there is even a song by Katy Perry that is called Zero Hero. How would you get people to find your product if you just play on words? Oh, this sounds funny, and call it this or that. And I mean, Notoberfest is one more playing around, but this is really funny, and it's basically a beer garden that will be open for a couple of weeks in Boston, Massachusetts. And why Boston? Boston is in Massachusetts, and recently there was an article that the main driver for alcohol-free beer in the US are the northern US states, and especially Minnesota, Mississippi, Massachusetts, and Maryland, so the M's. Are driving the growth of alcohol-free beer. They quadrupled over the last 4 years from a 1% share of alcohol-free beer to 4%. And if you remember last week's numbers, who's drinking alcohol-free beer, the US is still sitting at a very small percentage. And just looking at those states, Connecticut 3%, New Jersey, Washington, Oregon 2%, Maryland, Massachusetts 4%. And what I want to say with that is, if you have a state that usually has a warm October where people still enjoy sitting outside, having a glass of beer, it is a smart move to say, hey, it's October, you want to have a beer, we have great weather, let's combine Sober October, serving your favorite beer in the alcohol-free version, and if you want to have a normal beer, why not? I mean, it's this parallel universe. They can coexist. It's not like in computer science 0 or 1. It's not binary. It's just they can coexist. And this is what I really like about this idea. The link is in the show notes, as well as the link for the study of IWSR when it comes to the growth of alcohol-free beer in the US. And last but not least, this was the news of the week in the alcohol-free space. Tom Holland. The actor Tom Holland, Spider-Man, if you don't know him, just watch the movie. He was quite transparent with his sobriety 2 years ago. He talked about his problem with alcohol on the podcast of Jay Shetty. And I really liked that he was talking publicly about this. He said, I just wanted to stay sober for 1 month, and I really discovered how badly I wanted to have a glass of alcohol. And then it turned out to be even more difficult in February and March. And then he said, okay, I want to try it at least until June. And he made it. And right now he has been sober for 2 years. And the next super logical move is his own product, his own alcohol-free product. And he launched, another wordplay, his own alcohol-free beer. It's called Beero, like zero, but with B. And there were so many articles on the internet on this launch. Nobody has tasted the beer yet. Many pictures. You can check this out on Instagram, wherever. And this is an article of X-Rock Radio, because it was just the shortest one, talking about his motivation behind. And if you're interested in the story of Tom Holland, just Google it. Listen to the podcast episode of Jay Shetty. It is super interesting because it's just authentic, and especially the process, how he discovered that he might have had a problem with alcohol. It really caught me. It is really interesting. So with those news, we will close the episode for this week. Thank you very much for listening. For any questions or topics or comments, comment below the episodes on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, or send me an email at podcast@pinotpixel.com. Have a great weekend. Ciao, ciao.